Welcome to the Black Male Impact. Today we have as guest Joseph Bowens. Joseph have been doing great work in the business sector. But before we get into the conversation itself, I want Mr. Bowens to share with us about himself and some of the things that he have been doing on his journey. Mr. Bowens, welcome to the Black Male Impact.
Yes, I'm glad to be here, Richard. Glad to be in company with you. Yes, my name is Joseph O.A Bowens, O.A Lushigan Askia. Lushigan means God has been victorious. Askia means he will be great, named after Askia Muhammad, who was a great leader in the Songhai Empire. I equip individuals who have been limited, who feel that they have been limited by their environment with techniques that will enable them to go beyond their limitations and secure victory in the battlefield of their subconscious. So I do public speaking in regard to that. And when people hear that limited, who feel that they are limited by their environment, usually focus on and know that, oh, you help with youth who are in their environment. And I said, yes, but also environment stretches out beyond that to employees who need employee engagement because they may feel like they're in a dead-end job. It could be men who need help enlarging their social group because they feel that they are limited by the environment of their peers. And so that's what I do there. And also, I am a contract consultant for business process optimization. I am a freelance project manager. My last contract job was with a great endeavor with a group of people that are building a cooperative grocery store. And so that's my focus. My focus is just developing people.
Okay, man, that's awesome. And being that people are the most valuable resources in any community, in any country, developing people will always help the development of one's community and of one's country. So that's a great job per se, or focus or career, because to help people to develop is always a great thing because there's so much in it. The reward, man, is endless. So you feel good to help someone. When you see them doing well, it's a joy just to see others being the best version of themselves. So that's important, man. But you said something about the subconscious
Yeah.
beyond. Yeah. So could you share a little bit more about beyond the conscious?
Yeah, so it's an excellent question. And by the way, I've said this on other videos. Richard, you do an awesome job at following up on questions, man. Like
Thank you.
that's no gas, man. Like I was like, man, he asked some great questions.
Thank you.
So I'm expected for those questions.
Yes, sir.
uh, and so, but yeah, so one of the things that I learned between 2016 and 2019 is the power of the subconscious
Okay.
and how there are an automatic response that our brain has programmed in certain situations, whether it's from trauma experience, maybe not even trauma, but just can be a promotion,
Yeah.
and there is that effects, and we don't even know it, but it's like we're on autopilot.
Yeah.
And we can rewrite the subconscious by repetition.
Yeah.
And so, and having techniques to, and with men specifically, which is which is what I strongly focus on, is that we require movement
Yeah.
with repetition. So sometimes the exercises will need to be implemented in addition to the repetitions, such as you may need to stand in front of a mirror, see your reflection, and then maybe have some hand signals to go on with the affirmations that you are saying to yourself. And so a lot of those things, we don't know it, or we didn't know it, that a lot of our emotions and situations might have been programmed from the music that we listen to.
Correct.
I'm a big Jay-Z fan, and so I can remember when albums came out, I would go to sleep listening to the album. And there's certain songs of Jay-Z that as soon as I hear the beat, I'm going in and I know it. And so However, what was the energy that he was as an artist? What was the energy that he was placing in that music that I didn't know that I was basically downloading for myself to respond in certain situations and to implement? And so instead of allowing someone else to create for me my identity, I create my identity for myself. And so that's what we can do with the subconscious, which is what we were talking about earlier about, equipping people and giving the power in their own hands. And so that's one of the things that it seems that we're not taught about enough, and not just in African descent community, but just everyone is not taught enough about how that you can be the captain of your soul.
That's awesome because, and I'm really glad you touched on that and the subconscious piece, because consciously we at times say we're going to do things, but we haven't override the old paradigm, old mindset. And if we don't change the way we have been conditioned to think about ourselves or what's possible, nothing really changed. We just go with the days and think we are changing things, but things are remaining the same because we
Hmm.
haven't got to the root of what's causing the dysfunction within our own lives or within our communities. So, man, I really, really appreciate that you share that piece about the subconscious, because a lot of guests have shared what we can do and what we
Hmm.
need to do, but sometimes not understanding that to override that old belief, that's what it takes. And sometimes it takes work,
Hmm.
real intentional work. And the next piece that you share that I really appreciate, and I didn't really know that about the movement or seeing yourself moving, because we're different, and as men, sometimes to make the things become a part of who we are. Yes,
Hmm.
maybe we have to get involved and make those movements and those gestures so we can finally develop the mindset and the perspective that we need to move forward. And that leads to this question: what is the mindset that it takes to make a positive impact?
I would say that a vulnerable mindset with a student heart, the heart to seek knowledge endlessly. You're never too old to gain new knowledge. And a vulnerable mindset, by what I mean by that is that being willing to be transparent, to show your weakness, to show your fears. That is a mindset. And there is a misconception that when you express weakness, that you're losing strength. However, it's the complete opposite. I've learned from different programs that the more you identify your weakness, share your weakness, and then go through that weakness, the stronger you are.
Yeah.
Is And it's not only just that someone can't hold that over you, it's that you're not limiting yourself with that.
And I'm glad you say that, outside of the vulnerable mindset and the student heart, because we have to be open to learn. But I also glad that you said about the weakness. And at times, that's how I used to think, that sharing the challenges that I have, it would be a sign of weakness. But I remember some years ago when I started going to college here, and in Jamaica, I didn't really pay attention a lot and speaking well, right? So I remember when I started working and I start asking my coworker, if I say something out of terms which is grammatically incorrect, please correct me, because
Mhm,
I wanted to become better. I wanted
mhm,
to develop. So you sharing, having that vulnerable mindset really plays a part, because it
mhm,
helped me. I'm still not perfect by any stretch, but I realized that when I was able to open myself to the parts of me that wasn't the best, right? I
mhm,
realized things change. So I'm going to go back to just asking you, with the student heart, how do you get someone who are unwilling to be open? And in those, we say we have conversations with other men, being that the focus is on Black men here. How would
mhm.
you help someone who seems to be reluctant in being open to change?
So one of the things that I'm on the path on myself of accepting is there are certain levels of personal development that is majorly the power of the person.
Okay.
So with the student heart, it's almost it's life.
Okay.
Life has to a circumstance has to come about that makes them say that I will do this, because the natural setting that will, in my experience, that will show a person their self is that old saying that if everyone around you is doing XYZ, if four people in your group are doing XYZ, you're going to be number five.
Yeah.
And so in that situation, a person has an ultimatum. And so let's say, in an analogy, you have everyone in your group is making six figures.
Yeah.
That person is not, that fifth person is not making six figures. They have two choices: increase their or change their lifestyle, their habits, so they can reach six figures, or change their environment and go to a group who are making the money that they're making now. So
Oh,
they
so
can either increase or they can decrease. And so when someone's around people who do have a student heart, I've actually seen it with people who are vulnerable.
okay.
I Because of the group of men that I was around between 2016 2019, transparency for me right now is fluid, and it's going to stay that way. I've seen men come around me, and maybe even if I just have one other person who has that vulnerable mindset, and someone else doesn't, I've seen them immediately exit,
Yeah.
and that's because they're not ready for that.
Man, what you share here is really powerful. And because sometimes you'll be wondering in certain environment why some people don't show up in certain settings when you know the opportunities are there
Mhm.
to grow for growth and for progress. But if they're not ready, they will oppose that outlook and perspective. And sometimes being that we may not be knowledgeable about what's going on, we be wondering, man, why are these people don't see the value in this that's happening? But it's because they don't have that vulnerable mindset or that student heart and willing to learn. So, man, I really appreciate you sharing that perspective, and I hope the listeners listening realize how important it is to be vulnerable. And being vulnerable, as Mr. Bowens said, it's not a sign of weakness. You become stronger by becoming the best version of yourself. And sometimes to become the best version of yourself, you have to be open and talk about where you're not strong so you can become strong. And man, thank you. What advice do you have for the men outside of being vulnerable and having a student heart on how they can play a role in creating positive change?
I would say that the role that someone can that they can make outside of that is being in parables. There is a sojourner, and then they come in contact with a wise counsel person that's sitting on the path.
Yeah.
To be that wise counsel person, one of the things, so my parents had me when they were, my mother was 35 and my dad was 45.
Oh, wow.
And so I was always was around older people, and then my siblings was older than me, so there was a lot of things I experienced, seen, that most people wouldn't see before they're 16 that I did.
Okay.
Take it as good or bad is whatever you say, wherever your viewpoint is, perspective. And so one of the goods that I say that I experienced is being around my dad's family members. 'Cause I was around men who were in their 50s, and it's something about age that is the best teacher.
Yeah.
And so going back to that willing to have a student heart, There be some men that won't become don't have that student heart to age 50,
Yeah.
and hearing their regret, their their like their reflections
Hmm.
in hearing that they were great on my path, just hearing what they said. So you don't have to organize an event, you don't have to organize organization, you don't have to do something like you or I are doing that are like creating platforms. You can just hear somebody in passing, see a young person, and just say, you hear them talking and just give them that input. And as black males, we're pretty good at that. You go in the barbershop or
That's right.
something like, are you on the basketball court or something like the young blood? You don't know what you're doing, young blood, young. You know what I'm saying? There's different sectors on that, so just continue to do that, and just share that with them, because one of the things that I even was able to do that myself with a group of guys. We This was unorganized, unscripted. We were talking about marriage because one of the guys that was in this circle was not married, and me and another person was. And he said, "Man, I don't know how y'all do it." And he went to express his feelings, and so I told him, I shared with something with him my dad said. My dad is not Aristotle. My dad is not he's not been perfect yet. He's had tremendous growth in the last 5 to 7 years. That our relationship and lessons that he's given me is valuable. And I transpired to them what he gave to me. And my dad said to me, he said, Joseph, unless you're willing to change, it's no matter how many marriages you have, you're still going to have the same situations that you face because you're the common denominator. And when I tell you the wisdom of that blew up, I'm
Wow.
telling you, man, be like, what? Man, your dad said that, man. And I'll be like, man, I didn't think nothing of it. Like I know it meant something to me,
Yeah.
but I didn't know how valued that was. So my dad was that old head on the road that I was talking about that is usually exemplified in parables, because that teaching or that parable, those wise words has helped people more than me.
Well, and that's a valid point right there. And we're talking about creating positive change. As you said, the change should start with us. We can talk about what needs to happen, but we have to start looking at ourselves and see what change we need to make so change can happen. And as you mentioned, that your dad said, we are always the common denominator in almost every situation. So, what it is it that I need to do to create that change? So, I hope the listeners hear that. And as men, at times we have to realize that we have the power. So, the change that needs to happen can start with us. We just have to look at ourselves and see what needs to happen for progress to take place. So, man, I'm glad that you share that, and being that you're around wise counsel. And at
Mm-hmm.
times, sometimes that's what we need. We need to hear from others what we need to hear, not even knowing that we really need to hear it, but sometimes that's because of experience. We get that knowledge. How can we, as Black men, help to change the narrative? And I think you kind of shared with your answering just a while ago by seeing a group and sharing, even sometimes without being invited. But how else would you say we can change the narrative?
Yeah, so one of the ways that I say change narrative goes back to my first response. Instead of in addition to having a student heart, having a humble heart. That's an adjective of student, of having a humble heart, being willing to be impressionist. And so one of the like having a childlike heart, that's the impressionable age when you're a child. So you can impress any identity on them that you desire if you are a parent. And so the great thing about as an adult, you can basically rewind time because you can impress the identity on yourself that you desire. You do not let your circumstances define you. You define your circumstances. And so that narrative that that is common, that people don't change. That is half truth. People don't change. People evolve. People evolve from events and environments. And so one of the things that, humans, and one of the things that brought me to that knowledge is that, humans are higher on the evolution chain than animals. And one of the great insight is that if you put a regular snapping turtle and a high predator water, by the second generation, the snapping turtle's baby's lineage will evolve to have horns and spikes on the shells. So that's evolution. So evolution is from events. So that environment changed. So the snapping turtle had to change. So people, so that narrative that people don't change, well, once you start having that vulnerable transparency conversations, at least me, once I started being around multicultural men who were overcoming, diseases, habits, they were, when we were sharing things, I'm like, oh, we've all got, oppressive circumstances that we have to overcome. So no one has this perfect genesis. And so if no one has this perfect genesis, then people just need to evolve in the situation. And so just taking that, going to that, having a humble heart, having that, being impressionable on your own identity, taking that responsibility goes back to the subconscious, and just making sure that you are identifying every day what you want to represent.
Just the example you use with the turtle, just the evolution, and I think that's what we're trying to do here right now. The things that we implement, the things that we do, and are consistent at doing it, the next generation will be ahead of us by the things that we do. So the changes that we create over time, change will happen. So we have to be willing to be in those spaces where we can share what we are going through, what we have overcome, so others can do the same, or the next generation can be ahead of us, because we break that cycle. We having those conversations that sometimes may be uncomfortable,
Yeah.
may be challenging, may be difficult. And by having those conversations and with other people who sometimes we don't really normally have those conversations with, we realize, as you mentioned, that we share some of the same struggles, some of the same challenges, some of the same wins.
Mhm.
And we can only progress by becoming aware of the things that we have been through and the things that we have done to accomplish what we have. And by doing that and on a consistent level, we only make it better for the next generation. So, in regards to changing the narrative, I think that's a great perspective to have, and know that the change sometimes takes time. And
Mhm.
but we are consistent at changing whatever areas of our existence, because we are not going to be focusing on the same things. We have different areas that we are passionate about, but by focusing on doing the things that we believe can make a difference, the next generation will be ahead of us. And I think that should be the goal. As there was this saying that says we should leave the place better than we found it. And
Yes.
so, and that's sometimes going to take working together collectively, and not always with our own group and stuff like that, because we still need support from others, but we have to do the part that we can do every time to make the progress that's needed. So, man, I appreciate that. And I know you're in business, and I know you're focusing on developing communities and helping people to become their best self. So, my question to you is, what or who has influenced or inspired you to pursue the path that you're on?
It was a collective of men. The first person was, it was this white preacher named Bert. Uh, he helped on me. He was a transparent person, and then there was a there were some Nation of Islam leaders. You have Dr. Miles Monroe, Dr. Eric Thomas, the author J.A. Reynolds. And J.A. Reynolds, he is a historian who focused on developing and making African Americans aware of their history, their global history. And I say, Richard, that when it comes to African descent's contribution to humanity, when I learn new facts, I have a dual response. I respond like Frederick Douglass did when he learned how to read, and I respond like the person in Plato's allegory of the cave. You know those two stories?
No, I'm familiar with, no, not necessarily. If you can,
So
yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So Frederick Douglass, I remember learning this and being like, man. So Frederick Douglass, when he learned how to read, he was able to read all the distasteful labels that was placed on his people,
Wow.
and he started regretting that he learned how to read. And I remember learning that and being like, man, to to gain a ability like that was suppressed by your people, that you regret that. Like, why would you have that feeling? And then when I learned new African descent history that has been hidden from us, I'm like that. I'm like, I don't necessarily regret that I learned it, but I'm like, it's one of those things that she's like, I become mad. I'm like, this is strategically hidden. There's no way. And then so like in Plato's allegory of the cave, there's three people in a cave. They think that this is life. When one of the members, they leave their position of seeing the shadows scattered on the wall, and they see that there's an outside world. So they go to the other people and they're waking them up, and they're like, hey, these shadows that we're seeing on the wall, these are just are these objects we're seeing is not real life. They're just shadows on the wall that people are coming in and showing us. There's actually real life out there. These people actually decline to follow him, and they threaten his life, and he leaves. And so I find myself like that because there's some people that want to stay, as Marcus Garvey said, mentally enslaved, because
Yeah.
they don't want to accept what is the truth in regards to African descent contribution and the possibility. However, I said if I cannot affect my cave, there's other caves out there that I can wake people up. One of the most recent discoveries that I had learned this week was about Alexander Pershkin. That is,
I've heard the name before. Yes.
man, Richard, man, I was so upset. I was like, a black man provided the Russian language? What? Oh my goodness! And then that his great grandfather Abram Hannibal, who also went by Hannibal, how he was a Russian noble person, nobility, and I'm just like reading this, and I was just like, this is bananas, and like, and you look at Alexander Pershkin, and you're like man, that guy, he looks like what's your guys, the quarterback from the Chiefs, Holmes. He was like Patrick Holmes. Like, and,
That's-
and then you read his writings, he even went by the African. And so it's like, oh my goodness. And then you look at his great grandfather. They actually do have, head pieces of him, and they didn't hide his features. Surprisingly, at least in one sculpture that I saw, they didn't hide his facial features, and you can see the African features and everything. And I'm like, and even look up his paintings, man, dark skinned guy, and I'm like, this is bananas.
you know, but man, I glad you're sharing some really great perspective, and it just shows, just from what you're sharing, not just only your knowledge base, but it also gives us some perspective to see where we have made tremendous contributions that we sometimes are not aware of. And if we don't take the time to learn or to find out what's out there, we may stay in this suppressive state and thinking that we are less than, or we can only accomplish to a certain level, when we have been blazing trails for years. And not until we become aware of our own greatness, we may live and die a lesser version that we can become. And because we are not aware of our greatness, we settle for what society tells us, and we stay within that space until death, and never realize our greatness or realize where we're coming from. And it's sad sometimes. Go back to what you said about Frederick Douglass. When you become aware of what all the things that have been put in place to brainwash us, to get us to think less of ourselves, you be wondering, man. You sometimes you be wondering, can you open the brains of those you're trying to reach and put that information in their heads and stuff like that? Because you said, look, I'm seeing it. Just
Yes.
like you said with Annabelle, as he saw greater things, and the people around him not seeing it. And sometimes it is sad, but as you mentioned earlier, where you're around 5 people or others, and they're making progress, and then those who are not ready may go back to what they're accustomed to. And those who are ready will go forward. But as men, especially when we are about making progress, making a difference, and implementing what we learn, those who are not ready, I'm for it. You can't wait around for those who are not ready. You have to go. And if you don't go, you will die with that thing which you have within you, because you cannot force people to see themselves beyond the shackles that society have placed on us. And we have those people around us, and if we're not careful, we too succumb to the limitations. It takes courage and it takes confidence, but I really appreciate those two stories and the people who have inspired you, as you mentioned, Eric Thomas, and those current individuals today who have shown us what is possible despite where we're starting our journey from. And we are all here to be influenced by others. And even when I saw the work that you're doing for in your community and the impact that you're making, that's inspiring because we don't get to see that often. So we just have to keep making that progress, keep moving forward as we continue on this journey. And with all of that you shared, with the knowledge that you gain, with the changes that you'd like to see, what is your perspective on the current climate of Black men in society today?
Yes. Can I add one thing to what you said
Yes,
before I
please.
answer that question?
Yes.
I wanted to share what I learned from. I want to attribute it to Bert, the person, the preacher.
Yes.
However, I can't remember exactly who said this to me, but I want to say it was him. When to what you were saying at that last comment, one of the things is a great leader is someone who is not afraid to provide their follower, their student, their comrades, the same information that they have. They're not scared of losing power,
Yeah.
control. They're not afraid to that. And the reason that they're not afraid is because they know their passion.
Yeah.
They know that no one can strip that from them. It's not. And then the law of attraction. I use it to solidify this as an example, and for the listeners, even if they're haven't read the story before of Absalom, the son of David, and Absalom was David's son. He basically forcefully was taking his father's ring. He started sleeping with his wives. He was forcing his dad out. Well, over time, Absalom got beheaded, the reign went back to David. So I say that to say, don't be afraid to give someone all the knowledge you have, because don't be afraid, because your passion is going to secure you
Yeah.
to still be the head and not the tail. And if somebody takes it forcefully and incorrectly, it's gonna come back to you.
Oh
It's
yeah.
so that's just one of the things, because I know I learned, so when before I learned that, I thought like, oh, let me keep some of this knowledge I got to myself, scared that to keep it to my heart, and not share it all. But that's not, when I was informed of that, I was, that was revolutionary for me.
Believe it or not, I came across that information some years ago, maybe around 2013,
Mm.
when I was a bit more intentional about just reading the Bible itself, because you grow up in that environment. So I took the time and I was like reading every day just to find out how I can compare what was written to current our life now,
Oh, that's good.
and just to look at, just to compare
Mhm.
and see, because I don't really see the Bible as a literal text. It gives you a deeper meaning to life than we sometimes, a lot of people read it just to read for literal information, just to read something. But you have to look how you can compare the knowledge to
Mhm.
then and your own experience. And it was in that time I started to realize I started writing a whole lot. So I was sharing everything I learned, realizing that it doesn't matter who takes what I know. They
Mhm.
cannot take away what's in me, because what's
Mhm.
in you, it's
Yeah.
already there. So it doesn't matter who, and I've seen people share something with them, then they start to do it like what I'm doing, right? And then
Yeah.
over months, it just go away, because that's not who they are.
Yeah.
You have to find who you are and
Yeah.
share who you are. And so that's great. And as men, we have to realize that, man, we can't hold back, because we're here to help others to be liberated,
Mhm.
right? And
Yeah.
because our role may be different, we have to be okay with that difference and share it. Whoever going to learn, and whoever want to take it, if that's not who they are, man, it's not going to last. And we
Yeah.
cannot, especially for progress, because that also has been a part of our conditioning to hold back, thinking that our own brothers and sisters going to take what's ours, when that's not the case. Our job is to help liberate and trust
Mhm.
each other as we go forward in this journey. But again, a lot of people, they read and sometimes just take the information as it is and don't really realize how, where do I fit into this, and what role should I be playing with what I now become aware of. And that's where the liberation start taking place, because it started to take place within you first. And then as we go forward on this journey, that's how we'll be able to liberate others. Because again, there's no way you can keep it if you want, but it ain't going to do nothing. It's because
Yeah.
no one is going to live forever, and you have to play your role in this process. And a lot of people don't realize that, and that's where we comes in with creating change. And I really, again, go back to, I really appreciate this conversation, because it gets me to tap into some of the things that I haven't talked about or remember that I've looked at. So just you sharing your knowledge and experience take me back to some of the things that I've already looked on. And that's how you know when you're having a great conversation. So my next question to you.
Oh, the climate question. Do you?
Yes, please, please,
Okay.
please. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So what would I say to the climate of? I would say it's a gray area, Richard, in my perspective, because it is sad in regards to that, and what we were speaking on earlier in regards of listening to wise counsel. The younger generation, while all of us, no matter our age, need need wisdom to hear, we need guidance. The younger generation, in my perspective, um, even though this is my first time, I haven't been an adult in multiple generations, but yet I would say just from listening to older heads and in my own experience, this generation is different. We we all have, no matter the age, 30 and up, we can relate to that. We had a big homie, an OG that we watched. We may not have said verbally, I'm watching him. He's but we watched him, and he didn't do anything. He was stern, he was strong, he was an example, and he was positive. He had self-awareness, and he wasn't doing anything, bad per se. You know what I'm saying? And so we watched them, and that person gave us hope. And that gray area, like these kids now, they don't do that. They don't look for the big homie and or the OG. And I think what I'm wrestling with now is that I wonder if they don't do that because they are emotionally intelligent in ways that we weren't. There's ways that they're struggling, that they're weaker than we were, but there's emotional intelligence that they have that we didn't have. And one of those is that the importance of consistent transparency. Going back to what I was talking about, transparency. These kids, boy, our pride will blind us. Our pride will blind us. And so these kids, they have multiple avenues of communications that they can learn something about someone. So if you are different in different circles and they are aware of it, they don't want to give you their attention. They don't want to give you 2 cents of respect because they like, you're not the same person that the thing was. And while we probably didn't care about that or whatnot, they do. I don't know if it's because of social media. I don't know what it is, but I've heard like, yeah, so like we blind, or we might be telling them, oh man, you need to do well by that lady, by that young girl. And like what we don't know is, a man might be that same person that's giving that wisdom might be messing with his auntie and he didn't even know, and he married, and he don't know that the young man know. He's like, man, get out of here. You know what I mean? So like, so it's one of those things that gotta be consistent. And going back to because no man is perfect, going back to that transparency part, you could be with a young guy that might just say that. You'd be like, man, I know it's tempting out here, man. I'm married. And sometimes I gotta be like, okay, don't look 4 times. You know what I'm saying? And I gotta know, I have to know myself. And knowledge of self, going back to knowing your weakness, stating your weakness is not doesn't identify you as being weak. It's it's a paradox because it makes you strong, because I'm like, okay, I know I can't go over to that party. Oh, I know I can't hang out with that person, because energy transfers. And so if I'm around, going back to what I said earlier, if I'm around 3 guys that, they are confident men that don't mind talking to multiple women, I know that before I was married, I was a flirt. So I know that I can't be around her, because I know what my steps are after flirting. And so, it's one of those things that, but those conversations, that's why I say it's a gray area, because those conversations, when the youth hear that, they're like, okay. And then going back to what I was saying about evolving as a person and not letting circumstances dictate how the trajectory of your life, when they hear that, okay, this person decided how their upbringing was going to be a small reflection of who they were going to become. I can take that power and control that for myself. They're listening to that, and that's what get them guys. Because I've seen youth, come back to me after a while. Because I've been in mentor programs for years. I've seen them not say nothing to me for months, and then come back to me and ask me one question. And before, I didn't think nothing of the one question, but then, I guess wisdom from age, and then I'm like, okay, they've been wanting to ask me that question. That's a seed that's been sown into them, that they asking me now. And I see that they start changing to differently and things like that.
Man, and you're right. It's one thing to say what we're doing, but the next is to model what
Yeah,
we're doing, especially with the current climate. So it's not just saying what we want to see happen. It's we have to get to a point where we model it, because again, society's already paint us in an image.
exactly.
Will we live according to the image and talk about something else, or will we talk about what we want to see change and model what we are talking about? Because again, people are watching, and sometimes more than we think. Uh, man, they see more than we sometimes say to an individual. So it's important, as you mentioned, that transparency, and it comes with action, modeling, words and actions align as we go forward, especially when we're talking about creating change and making progress, because again, society tell us who we are, and if we listen to those limitations, we fall prey to the false narrative or the falsifications when it comes to us as people, and as Black men. It is what it is. We know how it is, but we have to go beyond that. The opportunities are out there.
Yeah,
Changes can happen. We can get into spaces now that we couldn't. But if we think that we cannot, we still may find ourselves being limited, because now we're thinking that, man, as a Black man, we can't get there. It may be harder,
yeah.
but we know progress is happening. But we have to be vulnerable enough sometimes to even make the attempt to go after and learning what we need to learn to make those advancements, in spaces that we want to.
And
Um,
those advancements, man, just coming, it's comes over with time. Tomorrow's not promised. At the same time, how we thought when we were 16, our worldview at 16 should be, and I know probably for you was different at 25. And it's just over the time because I know, my mom taught me right and wrong, and so she didn't teach me about there's gray, and then there's things that I see now as a family man and in my 30s that I'm like, there's so much gray in the world.
yeah,
There's not like what is, and Black people, African descent people have history of gray. It was a crime for a Black person to learn how to read. So that's the crime. It was a crime to defend your household. Somebody is trying to come into your house, during the civil rights age, somebody's trying to, you know, touch your wife wrong, or say something to your children wrong. You as a man defend your house.
yeah,
That was a crime for you to stand your ground. For a Black man to be a man and stand his ground, that's that gray area. You know what I mean? And then as you have those transparency conversation as a man, you just learn those gray areas. Like, as I mentioned earlier, like my dad and I, our relationship's grown over the time, and it's like there's situations I look at now in my own life, specifically marriage, and I'm like, okay, I see now. I'm like, okay, it's one of those situations like that choice and the choice I made or I could have made. That there's some days that you're like, I want to choose this choice, and it's like, and it's just one of those things that you don't learn until over time, and it's just one of those things that you might think that choice that you made was best at that time, and then after time comes, you're like, oh, that wasn't a good decision. So that's just great, and just sharing that with the youth, that about that gray too, because that's the climate that they're in, and just mentorship, being fatherless, homes, economics, things. There's so much gray in there that, it's just the best way is just to teach them to be captains of their soul,
yeah.
teaching them about taking that subconscious.
That's great, and that goes back to what you said in the beginning: the vulnerable mindset and the student heart. Let them know that yes, we too have made mistakes prior to, because that's where the vulnerability comes in. Because we, as you mentioned, we can tell them all the good things that we want to, but
Mm-hmm.
when they realize that, what, man, I have made mistakes too, will get them to really listen to you more,
Mm-hmm.
because that's when they start to say, oh man, this person is a real person.
Yeah.
and they didn't just walk a straight and narrow path and everything was okay.
They
You know,
still not. At least I'm.
that's right. That's right. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I was going to ask the what you want to see as general to see change, but you have touched on a lot of those points before in the conversation. Like, what change do you want to see in general amongst Black men,
Yeah.
from vulnerable mindset to the student heart, to be open, to challenge oneself? You have touched on that, but do you have anything else that you want to say, or should I just go into the next question that I want to ask you?
I would like to elevate the statement that you made moments ago. Earlier, you said about us not being required to be the same and growing in that authenticity. I just want to highlight that because that's a narrative to change. Because us as impactful Black men, we we believe that we have to be the same at some point, and we don't have to be the same. You look at, Dr. Eric Thomas, Michael Eric Dyson, and I believe it's the Wall Street Thug. He's a new social media influencer, just giving financial literacy.
Oh,
Uh,
okay. I think I came across him. I think he may have been on the Earn Your Leisure. I want to think
um,
one of those social media. They talk a lot about financial literacy.
yeah, but if you look at all three of those Black males, they all have knowledge of self. They all are high achieving executors, but none of them look the same and none of them sound the same. And
Correct.
so that's one of those things that, just to having that narrative change, that Richard and Joseph may not look or sound the same, but we can make a strong impact. Going back to a teaching that someone gave me, a Jewish teacher gave me, is about David and I didn't know this till they told it to me. Looking at David and, or they taught it to me. Not David, Moses and Aaron.
Yeah.
How I didn't know that they was different. They was like, Moses was the person that was in regards to what did God need, and they said Aaron was focused on what did the people need. That's why when Moses was gone for a minute, he was like, "What do people need? Let me give him this gold calf real quick." And then he was partying with him with the gold calf, and Moses came down and he was like, but I had to keep the people happy. And so, but they individually they didn't work, but together they worked.
Yeah.
And so that's one of those things, that narrative changing, because we don't all have to think the same, and just having that difference, that different thinking, and have it be cohesion, just
Yeah.
coming together and make a stronger impact.
Well, and that's important, very, very important, especially we're talking about moving the needle forward, and not just as Black men, but as a family unit. When we're in our household, that's important. Where our thoughts may be different, but how can our difference in thinking and perspective merge together
Mhm.
to be a stronger force? Because it's not that you're trying to make people to be like who you are,
Mhm.
but how we can go forward with the knowledge and perspective that we have to advance and make progress. And so
Yeah.
that's really important as we go forward. So with
And I
that,
like to say, to give an action item to listeners to grow into that, is just growing in your individuality, and doing things, having aspirations, hobbies, interests that you do alone, so you can clarify if you enjoy something. There was a set of time that there's an app out there called Meetup. I would use that to see different things that I would like doing. You might think like, oh, I need to go with a friend or somebody I know now, but you don't, because all those people that use that app are strangers, so they all help you. And also, I would advise not to go with somebody because their limitation or their perspective might limit your fulfillment that you might gain. They
yeah,
might say, "Oh, this is whack," and then because you're like, "Yeah, I guess this is pretty bad," but don't let that influence you, because go alone, you might like, man, I like this. And that might be something, that might be a hobby that rejuvenates you or inspires your creativity in other sectors of your life. During I learned that I like hiking. And I learned that I like country music. It's crazy, Richard. I would never listen to country music prior to like, I want to say prior to 2016. And one day, man, we had to go to a birthday party. And I was like, listen, and I think me and my wife was at differences. And I turned, and the country song came on. And I was like, yeah. But yeah, man. So yeah, that's all I say, man.
No, but that's great. That it's good just to realize that even in those spaces, you may not know what you like, and if you are around people that will limit you,
Mhm.
you may find yourself limiting yourself because then you're going to pull the energy from other people. So that's important. So, what was a pivotal moment in your life?
2016 to 2019, I built confidence mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Went through a addiction rehab program. Went through man development as husbandry, fatherhood. Went through those principles, and God guided me through with the law of attraction and with the law of authenticity. So those two.
Oh man, that those are important. With law of attraction and law of authenticity, because we need to show up in the world as who we are, and
Mhm.
not as how people want us to show up, or show up how we believe that people are going to like us. Then you show up for people to like you, but you don't like you.
Yeah.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
So I really like that perspective, the law of authenticity,
Yeah.
because you need to like who you show up as. And that's
Right.
really, really important. And that can be a pivotal moment for anyone, just to start accepting yourself as who you are, and as especially for us as Black men, sometimes based on the environment in which we grew up and based on what we didn't see within our environment in our homes and stuff like that, we show up in different spaces as imposter because we don't really fully accept ourselves. And when we work hard and becoming the person that we are, then we feel less than in spaces that we should be feeling powerful. And that's something that we have to start to own, our greatness and who we are, and just that authentic self, as you mentioned, because being authentic will help you to start attracting other things to you, and things that you want, or just are being around people who think like you, because now you are being yourself. So you start to connect with like-minded people, because that's where the law of attraction comes in. So it's not only the opportunities, but also people who you will have a better vibe around in regards to the things that you want to accomplish, and the impact that you want to make. So man, those are really important and great reminders, especially the authentic part of what you just said.
Richard, man, you just said a mouthful of fire, and haven't seen it in your previous videos, but you might want to have your editor put all the quotes that you just said in the last 2 minutes, man. Put them on the screen, man, because I was saying like, man, that was fire. He said some, yeah, man, that
Appreciate
was good.
Yeah, I appreciate it. At times in these conversations, things comes up that is there buried. And so, but I'm going to take your advice though and get the editor to make sure, because I may need to remember myself. That's right. That's right. But just the conversations at times help to unearth things that
Mhm.
we have
Yeah.
within ourselves that we sometimes forget, and not just others that needs to hear it, but we need that reminder as well. So I'm glad that you pointed out. So I'll make sure, make me make a note now. Yeah, but that's one thing that we, when we're going forward, man, we have to be willing to show up as who we are, and be unapologetic about it, because this is not about what people think. Once we're not going out there to hurt people or damage people or trying to take things illegally, once we show up as who we are and in our best selves, we should and do it unapologetic, especially as we're thinking about moving the needle forward. And that leads to my next question. What life lesson have you learned late in life that you believe is important and can benefit this current generation?
The two that I've learned was, well, I would say it's two. The first one is what I said earlier about that, life is full of gray, and because that was something that that burdened me, because I would be after a term of my life not being concerned with or being proactive to what is the moral decision. Once I was evolving and changing to be proactive to about what is the best decision of integrity, I was coming in contact with gray in situations. And so right and wrong is not simply defined. And there's a lot of industries out there that face the same thing in their day to day. And just in life, you just find that there's gray. And so that's one thing that was a big life lesson that helped me out once I finally accepted and learned that do exist. And then the second I would say is that failure is not separate from success. Failure is a part of success. They're one in a hand. And so I used to be scared or fear of failure. And once I learned that, I accepted that and told myself that failure is only quitting to not carry out the commitment. Failure is not learning a lesson or having multiple trials. That's not failure. Failure is only after having trials, you're like, I'm just going to stop doing it. Now you failed, and now you are a failure. Mm-hmm. Failure is not when you like, oh, I did it 5 times. I had to do that 5 times before I had some progress. I had to do it 10 times. That's not failure. It's actually success, because you're building something. We're looking at the material, the physical, but there's things inside of us that's being built. One of the things that, and I didn't, for various reasons, didn't play football. Yeah, there's one of the best exercises that I loved and love participating in is when you are a player, there's a tunnel, and in the tunnel, your teammates have mats on each side, and player has the football in practice, and they're building up the running back, the wide receiver, they're building up their resilience. And so when they're going through the tunnel, they're hitting the mats on them. And what that is doing is building up in the player the resilience, the determination to persevere. You're hitting me on that side, but I'm still coming through. You might knock me down, but I'm still coming through. There's a movie, Cool Hand Luke, and then people don't know Cool Hand Luke, Life. Have you seen either of those 2 movies, Richard?
No,
Cool Hand Luke or Life? So Life is with Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence, and then Cool Hand Luke. They kind of got the same storyline, but anyway, I'll use for the platform, I'll use Life. But in Life, Eddie Murphy's character Ray didn't want to share his cornbread. The big guy said, "You gonna eat your cornbread?" They have a yard fight. And this big guy was beating Ray, Eddie Murphy's character, up. But he kept getting up. And so the fight only ended because the prison guards came in and broke it up. And Eddie Murphy is being carried by the big guy to, I guess, I can't remember what happened in the next scene, but they eventually became friends. But anyways, carrying, and he tells Claude, which is Martin Lawrence's character, he says, he still didn't get my cornbread, and the big guy hits. But that's that resilience, that's that perseverance. So in my eyes, Eddie Murphy didn't lose because he kept getting up, and he was going to still get him. And in Cool Hand Luke, it's the same thing. Like the guy, he was not a Paul Newman character. I love movies. Paul Newman's character, he was not going to stay down, and that's one of the things that resilience of that, like I said, that failure is one, and it's a cycle. It's a part of success. You can't have success without failure.
Yeah.
So
And I appreciate those examples, but I appreciate even more just the reminder of being resilient, because a lot of times we may try to pursue goals, and because it didn't work, we quit, and not realizing that it may only need for us to get up one more time or to go at it one more time. But a lot of people will not know, because they have tried several times and then they fail. They may not have even tried 10 times. And there are things that we enjoy today that individuals have tried hundreds of times, thousands of times before they're successful at it. So that's a great reminder to be resilient. And I think that will take us to where we want to go, help us to achieve goals and stuff like that. So man, I do appreciate that. And just those movies for those individuals who haven't watched it and stuff like that. Those are great. Because at times, man, the movies really, and that's how I like to watch whatever I'm watching. I try to find the meaning that they're trying to portray in the movie, because then if it's just entertainment, then maybe I'm just wasting time. I'm looking for something that's
facts.
beneficial. So that's very important at times, that we gain the knowledge from what we are watching and stuff like that. So before I have two more questions, before I ask my final question, where can the listeners find you and help support the work that you're doing to make a difference?
Yes. So you can find me on LinkedIn. My full name, Joseph Alushigan Askia Bowens. I do have a blog, AnthemC.wordpress.com. If you put Anthem C WordPress in, the website come up. I'm doing a workshop on March 29th. It is Mask Off, Honest Expression Development. What it is talking about is on Eventbrite. I can send you the link. What it's talking about is the psychology of the persona mask. As you were talking about, you mentioned it earlier about, being consistent or being tired, being exhausted, as men being exhausted because we're being different people. We don't like who we are. And so in that workshop, I talk about the different persona masks that we create, why we create them, and provide exercises for people to use so they can break that. I also ebook release where I documented the first 5 years of my marriage, and that's just a quick, easy read ebook, just so I could help men who maybe didn't have a father. And so I share some of the struggles, or didn't have somebody that they can be transparent with on their questions about marriage. Some things that I encountered during my first 5 years. I created an ebook called "Are You Still That Much Into Her?" And the reason that title is because we have a level of affection for our spouse if we choose to marry her. We have a level of affection before we propose, and we're like, oh man. But after a while, it's like to that point that you're like, maybe I don't, maybe I don't still like that part of her, or maybe I don't still want to do that. And so that's why I named it "Are You Still That Much Into Her?" And so those are the things people can reach me, and that is free. So I can give you that link too. So if you want to put that, include that in anything.
Okay, yeah, man, that's important. And and sometimes that's a struggle for all of us, just to continue to build that relationship and stuff like that. So that's
Yeah.
so yeah, please do send the link so I can take a read myself, but I will also share in the description so others can download it as well. And so my next question, my final question: what impact do you want to have on the world?
The impact that I want to have on the world is creating a lifestyle of authenticity, a lifestyle of hope that can be rejuvenated in the people that feel disregarded by humanity. And it's because I was the type of person before 2016 that I was I fell to the perception that others had of me. And I was limited by that in years prior, and that I couldn't see past that. And so from 2000, so it was just, I would say, yeah, it's really started in 2016, and it was just that breaking where my consciousness it changed in 2011. It really didn't have that where I'm like, okay, I'm not the F up that are the committed to trouble person that was always my life, that was that was late proclaimed by teachers and different things like that. So that's what I wanted to provide, that when material that I have, just some people in communication with me, no matter what age group, that they feel like, what, I'm gonna be better than yesterday. Because a lot of people out here are teaching you how, which nothing's wrong of it, teaching how to make six figures. But I'm just trying to get through a Tuesday. You know what I mean? You got those seasons where you just like, I'm just trying to get through today. You know what I mean? And one of the fire words that you said, there was many of them, when you were talking about just being somebody that you don't like, being somebody that you do like. The Jay-Z line, people that know me is like, oh, I thought he was gonna go without giving a quote in the Jay-Z line. Nope, I gotta do. There's a Jay-Z line that says, when I look in the mirror and say, there I am. And then that line is talking about, like what you said, you look in the mirror and you got all these personas that you placed on. You might not want to look at yourself, but when you can look at yourself and say, in all the events, circles that I was in today, I was consistent. I was the same person. I didn't change up. And so that's what that means. That's what that line means. And that's what I want to provide to people, because you can be happy making $40,000, $50,000 if because you're consistent in all areas of your life. You've come to grips with your decisions that may have not have been great. You come to grips with your insecurities, your weaknesses, your failures, and none of those limit you anymore. You've stated those out. You walked those out through those with people, and now you're just almost somewhat clean, because like you still might have those struggles and those impacts and not be perfect. It is different when you have knowledge of self and you can apply what to do to avoid making it, or have knowledge of self and you can apply what to do if you did make the wrong decision, to counter it and not make it in the future. So that's the lifestyle that I want people to have, and just to bring, no matter what's their color or creed, just so that they can have. Because man, life is hard, Richard.
Oh yeah, it ain't easy. Man, it ain't easy. But it's as you mentioned, man, it's just to accept those areas of your life. Accept the decisions too, because how we are living, it's based on the decisions that we have made, and it could be decisions that we have made some time ago, and that's affecting us today. And what we have to realize, we can't punish ourselves for the decisions that we have made in the past. There were decisions before we become aware, and it's just part of who we are. And now, as you mentioned, I can just imagine how the mask off is going to be impactful, because at times, again, goes back to your first point of being vulnerable, having that vulnerable mindset. Because a lot of times we stay trapped in the mistakes that we have made. And if you're trapped in a mistake, and if how you have perceived yourself, it doesn't matter how far you get ahead, you're still living from that place of mistake, or that place of bad decision. And we have to just realize that that was just a part of our existence. We cannot live there. We already made those mistakes. You can't change it. It doesn't matter how powerful you are. It doesn't matter what money you have. You can't change. No, none of us can change the decisions that we have made in the past. We have to accept it and move forward and realize that if we're going to become who we're capable, who God have created us to be, we have to move forward and just live the best way we know how from this point going forward. Yes, sir.
Those bars, man. Again, man, you got to put quotes on the screen, man. You killing it, man.
And I appreciate that, man. But I'm gonna make sure I get the editor to make sure they put it up.
You killing it, man. Those were good. Those were real, man. That was great. I
Yeah,
appreciate
man.
that.
Yeah, man. And but I want to say, man, thanks for being here on the Black Male Impact. This has been a really great conversation, as our goal here at the Black Male Impact is to inspire positive change. And from the start, the conversation has been real, has been candid, have been great points from that vulnerability mindset, to the last thing that you share with the conference that you'll be having with Mask Off. Because as men, if we're going to move forward in power, we have to realize who we are, and just so we can make the impact that we are capable of making. Yeah, man. I appreciate you being here on the Black Male Impact.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it, man. Appreciate being on.